How are we doing? Fantastic. We just had a fantastic panel in this room, and I heard some of the great conversations that were going on outside. It's now my pleasure to invite up a really quite extraordinary young man. He is actually 28 now, I think, so he's becoming a bit older. I was first introduced to him a few years ago, and the first time we were chatting, he just looked me straight in the eye and went, "What book are you reading?" I thought it was a very interesting provocation, and it actually took a conversation in a deeper way. But Timothy Armoo at that point had just founded a company called Fanbytes. That was influencer marketing business. He'd already set up and sold a business at university. He sold Fanbytes about 16 months ago. He was one of Forbes 30 under 30, and he's got 83,000, I think 83,000 followers on LinkedIn. But he's here to just tell a little bit about his story and a little bit of advice for all you. Timo, it's a great pleasure. The stage is yours. And by the way, all of you, as Timo's speaking, if you've got a question, just ping it through on the normal way, and we'll do a Q&A at the end.
Cool, sweet. Yeah, so 83,000 and 70,000 on Instagram. That's the important one. That's the important one, right? That's what people care about. Insta, not LinkedIn. Anyway, hello. So, as mentioned, my name's Timothy Armoo, and I'm the founder of a company called Fanbytes. And Fanbytes was a company I started about 6 years ago. And I started it in my second year of university. I went to Warwick University whilst doing a computer science degree. And in my second year, I was like, this influencer marketing thing is becoming more popular. Brands are going to need a way to tap into them. So I started this company, and in 6 years we took it from just myself to a team of 75 people, working with brands like Nike, Samsung, McDonald's, and the UK government. And in that crazy run, as Nigel was saying, last year on the 6th of May, we announced that the company had been acquired in an 8-figure exit, which was a multi-million pound deal. And me at 27, I was like, how the heck did we get here? But the story is not all rosy because of where I came from, right? So I grew up pretty much split. So I was born here, but then I went to live in Ghana for 10 years. And I came back here when I was around, 10 years old. And I grew up on a 4th floor council estate on Oak Kent Road. By show of hands, how many people know where Oak Kent Road is? All right, so you know that growing up on Oak Kent Road was not an easy ride. Between Peckham, Brixton, gang violence, drugs, all of that stuff. And I grew up there, and I kept telling myself every single day, I was like, I need to make it out. I'm going to make it out, I'm gonna make it out, I'm gonna make it out. Because I just felt like I didn't deserve to be there. And I just had this vision for myself which said, this is not the path for me. And I can imagine that's probably for a lot of young people here, there's this sense of, okay, where I am is not where I'm going to be. And I've been building companies for a while. So I started Fanbytes at 21. Before that, I started a company at 17, which I sold. And then before that, I started a company at 14. So I've basically been a tinkerer every single time. And what I wanted to share was basically like 5 things that I wish someone had basically taught me getting into the world of work. So take me almost as like your old uncle who's sitting you down and basically saying, yo, this is the play, do this, don't do this, right? So I'm your old uncle for the next 15 minutes. All good? All right, so uncle, what is the first one? So the first kind of bit of advice I wish someone had told me before was to work with what you know. So I told you that the first ever thing that I started was at 14, and it was actually a tutoring company. And I'll tell you the story of the tutoring business because I think it's a very interesting example of how you have so many skills and you forget that you have those skills. So I started this when I was walking back with a friend from school, and we saw this black Mercedes-Benz. And this Benz, like, picture in your mind the sleekest car you can ever think about. And he turns to me and he says, "How much do you think that is?" And at 14, I don't really have a sense of money, right? So I'm like, I don't know, 500 pounds, right? I just say the biggest number that I could possibly think of. And he says, "I bet you wouldn't make 500 pounds before you turn 18. And I'm like, yeah, okay, it's on. I am going to figure out how to do this. So this was a while ago. So then I go on Google and I search how to make money online. Now, if you had searched how to make money online 13 years ago, all you will see are frauds and scammers. Everyone is trying to sell you the course. Learn how to make money online, learn how to do this. But then I saw something which was work with what you know. And on that day, I realized I had done very well in a maths exam. And I was like, I'm going to tutor people maths. So then the next day, I go into school and I say, yep, I now have a company. My company is Alpha Tutoring, and I'm teaching people maths. And the thing is, in school, people actually knew me as someone who was good at math. And so I started getting people coming to me to get tutored. And I was like, wow, I can't believe this just happened. And then people started coming to me for chemistry and physics. And I was like, I do not know about chemistry and physics that well, but I know other people who could. So I then went to the teachers, the chemistry and the physics teachers, and I said, who did well in the last test? And then they tell me, then I just go to that person and I'll be like, do you want to make some money? And so my entire tutoring business was basically me connecting people who wanted tutoring with other student tutors. And we grew that business in 6 weeks. I had 65 tutors who were basically connecting through me. And the lesson here, which is interesting, I wish someone had actually told me this, was what I was doing there was I was like looking at what I was generally good at, and then I was taking that and I was turning it into some sort of business, something that could actually help other people. And there's so many people here, and I talk to so many young people who are like, oh, I'm not good at anything. Like, really? There are so many things that come very naturally to you. You could talk about for days and days and months that someone else would find it incredibly boring. And that is something that you have some kind of competitive advantage over, and you can truly build some kind of expertise. And it doesn't have to be a business. It could just be something that because you are good at it, other people would pay you for it as a freelancer, as a side hustle. So that's the first thing, work with what you know. The second thing, and it took me quite a long time to understand this, was that your youth is a massive superpower. And I'll give you two stories. So the second business that I started was a business called Entrepreneur Express. And basically all it was like an online business publication. And I was thinking about how to drive traffic through it. It was just like online magazine about business, doing interviews and sharing all that stuff. And I was thinking about how I can drive traffic, and everyone was talking about Google ads and SEO. And I was like, bruh, all that thing needs is more money, and I don't have the money for it. So how can I hack my way into this? And 10 years ago, Facebook was really in its heyday. This was where people were building big Facebook pages around certain topics. And because I was young, I understood that Facebook pages were blowing up. This is when Lad Bible and all of these guys were just like coming up. In fact, there are group chats of myself and the founders of Lad Bible talking about like swapping content together and growing our pages. And I was like, what if rather than me doing the old school way of doing things, I could actually go the new school way? So I could actually take articles from my online magazine and put it into the Facebook pages, because I can build really big Facebook pages around motivation and business and inspiration. And then I can take articles from there, put them in the Facebook page, and that will drive people there. And that was my hack. And the only reason I could easily get that was I was like, well, I'm young, I'm on Facebook, I get it, I know how this works, other people don't. And here's the crazy thing. it actually worked. And I was shocked. I'm like, why isn't everybody doing this? And the reason why everybody wasn't doing this, because my edge was that I was young and I understood the platforms better than anyone. And that was the way that I drove traffic. And 11 months afterwards, I get an email from someone and he says, hey, we're interested in partnering up. And I look at the email, it's like Ben at Horizon Media. And I'm like, okay, yeah, partnering up. Bear in mind, I'm 17 at this time. So I'm thinking, partnering up, okay, we'll do some kind of swap. And he said, right, can you send over your stats and your audience about your magazine? And I send it over, and I remember this. I'm wearing my Man United shorts, and I no longer support Man United. I'm not an Arsenal fan. But anyway, let's move on. And I go on the call. I remember this, and it's a Skype call. And he goes, rather than partnering up, we're interested in buying you. And I'm 17. I'm living in a 4th floor council estate on Oaken Road. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, of course. Yeah, this sounds a good partnership. My legs are shaking because I'm like, how is this even possible? And in 2 weeks, we sign deals and I get into my bank account 110 grand for something I started 11 months ago. And I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. But the only reason why that was able to happen was because I used my youth as a superpower. I understood the algorithms. I understood that. And for so many people here, we might go, oh, well, I'm young, and so therefore that means I can't do what like the older people do. I can't do that because they have more experience. That's just BS, right? Because there's so much competitive advantage that we have. A second story I'll actually tell you about this is how I met Richard Branson. So this story is still with Entrepreneur Express. And I was thinking about how I get really good interviews. Because remember, I mentioned this whole business was a business publication. How do I get really good interviews? And I saw that a guy called Vishal was hosting something called Business 2020. And Richard Branson, Alan Sugar, and James Caan were all speaking there. And I was like, I need to get there. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I need to get there. So I email, press at blah, blah, blah. Obviously, nobody responds because they're all catering to like the BBCs of the world. And I'm like, I need to figure out how to get into that room to do this interview. Because I know if I'm able to interview Branson, that'll be a good story. People would be driven to it. And so I'm like, what would he want? What would he want that I have? It's like, I'm a 17-year-old. The one thing I have is a lot of time. And I also have a lot of energy. And he is putting on a conference where he's paying a lot of people to basically do a bunch of admin. So I'm going to email him and I'm going to say, you don't know me from Adam, but I would like to come 2 days before the conference and I will lay out every single chair for you for the conference. And all I ask is that you give me a press pass so I can interview. I send that email, and in 20 minutes, he goes, I like your courage. Okay, let's do it. And in 2 days, I was backstage with my crappy little notebook, asking Branson questions and thinking, oh my God, I can't believe I've just hacked my life into this again. Why? Because again, if I was, I don't know, maybe older and I send that, he'd be like, well, are you coming to steal our chairs? Are you coming to do something a bit crazier? But again, because my youth was a superpower, I really went into that. So I really want to encourage people here not to kind of go into it and think like, I'm young and so I can't do this. If anything, it's I'm young and so I can do this. So you have such a big edge. The final two things that I wish someone had told me was, when we started Fanbytes, took it to exit, and we had a team of people, right? One of the things that I realized was that the people who did well, who grew very, very fast inside of the company, were not actually the smartest people. Their general attitude can be described in one word, which is they were dependable. And when you get into the world of work, I know there's a lot of 17, 18-year-olds here. when you get into your first job or your first whatever internship, apprenticeship, you can actually be surrounded by people who you think, oh, they're way smarter than me. And so you think, oh, well, what's the point? But the game is not actually about intellect. It's about dependability. I'll tell you a story that we had someone in the company, Tom. Tom stayed with us for basically 4 years. Tom started off a campaign exec, and basically by the time we sold the company, Tom was the head of campaigns. He started off as a 22-year-old, and by 26, he was overseeing a team of 46 people. Why? Because anytime we threw something at Tom, he just picked it up and said, right, I don't know how this works, but I'm going to figure it out. Now, going to football, as you know, I was a previous Man United fan, right? I can see some people shaking their heads like, you traitor, but oh well, right? How many of you guys know someone called Michael Carrick, by show of hands? Right, cool. Michael Carrick is like the most clutch person, right? He's not the person who takes the spotlights and everything, but he is dependable. He is the type of person where you know, all right, we need someone to go in, do a job, he's our guy. And often I say, when I think about companies and how people can like grow in their companies, it's like, you almost want to be a Michael Carrick, like the person who, you know, in a final, they're clutch. You throw something at them, they're clutch. They basically like take control of everything. They may not be the best in the world, but they're the people who you know when it's crunch time, they will be there. And it's very important that I think now, especially with like so much competition, you really focus on how you can take things on and grow and grow. And then the final thing I wanted to share is your uncle telling you about the world of work, right? Is over-invest in relationships. So one of my biggest regrets is I did this way too late. Way too late, right? So I was really passionate about doing well in business, right? I saw business as my way out of the ends. I saw it as like, this is the thing. And so because of that, I was very, how shall I say this? I was a bit of a dickhead, basically, right? Because I focused so much on like me. What do I get from this? What do I get out of the transaction? And then when you think about it, the people that you know now, if you treat them right and if they treat you right, are also going to be the people that you will know in 5, 10 years. And Lord knows where those people will go. And when you're young, you kind of forget that like who you are now kind of defines who you are going to be in 10 years. It's not as if like you in 10 years is just a complete stranger. It's the stuff that you do now. But more importantly, it is the relationships that you have now. And I would be very focused on just me until probably I say around 23, around 22, 23, when I thought, this is just really stupid. Because especially if you're thinking about launching a business or doing anything which involves the world of work, you are interacting with people. And so over-investing in relationships, giving without taking, and not feeling as if everything has to end with what's in it for me, is quite a major thing. And the great thing, because we have so many young people here, is you have so many things that people would want. And what's great is you are allowed to fail. In fact, you're expected to fail at things. And so because you're expected to fail at things, if you don't fail at things, everyone's like, oh my God, this is so amazing. You haven't failed at the thing. So you basically end up, for just a bit more effort, for just a bit more discipline, you end up getting a crazy amount of rewards. And it's kind of a cheat sheet, because basically what that's saying is, if a 17-year-old and a 37-year-old do the exact same thing, the 17-year-old gets more rewards just by virtue of being young and just by virtue of almost like overcoming very low expectations. And when you think about it in that way, the only thing you can say is, oh my God, this is an amazing time to be alive. And then the final thing, actually about this point about an amazing time to be alive, right? 2 weeks ago, I spoke to these two 16-year-olds. these two 16-year-olds were making 100 grand a month from meme accounts. What they were doing was they were finding like phishing meme accounts on Instagram, and they were going on AliExpress and Etsy, and then they were finding stuff there, branding it as theirs, and then promoting it through phishing accounts. And they were making 100 grand from selling this stuff, and then Shopify and Amazon. And I thought, wow, to quote a great philosopher, Drake, like, what a time to be alive. Like, what a time to be alive, that with your intellect, with your effort, with your determination, and with just accessing the information that we have around, people can do that in a world where it was not possible. So really be aware of the great opportunity that we have here. Really be aware of the fact that we're kind of the first generation where we saw like dial-up and then go to the internet and then basically build an entire career of like this crazy piece of plastic here, right? Take advantage of it and don't get into the world of work and the game of business if that's what you want to do. Don't get into it with a kind of like, well, what can I do? I'm so helpless. Because actually, you can do a lot more than you think, right? Thank you.
Cool. Right, do we have any questions that have come through from the audience? So one question I'm going to ask you first. So they were some great stories that you've had so far. What's your one bit of advice about what do you think is going to be different in the next 2 years?
Next 2 years, okay. I think in the next 2 years, the thing that's going to be different is that more people are going to be, more people are going to be aware of how crazy the extent of information there is out there. So let's pick the whole wave of AI. Everyone's talking about AI. You can just lock yourself in your room for a weekend and learn some of the most insane things on AI. And your mind will be blown because you realize that the differentiator is not money, it's just you just like focusing on being good at a specific thing. Whereas previously, I think people were just not aware. And now you have TikTok and YouTube and so much information showing you that it is going to be quite different to the way that it was before.
Yeah, cool. I really want to focus on that last one.
Yeah.
Because I know a little bit of the answer as well. Because how did your upbringing influence your resilience? So, and you and I bonded over this a little bit. So again, talk a little bit about, again, your parents and...
Yeah. So I've had a very interesting upbringing. So let me think. It definitely made me a lot more determined. I felt as if I had something to prove to the world. Unfortunately, when I was 21, my dad passed away. And the crazy thing is I actually found him passed away, which is like an incredibly kind of visceral thing. And for me, though, I remember before he passed away, it was kind of at the start of Fanbytes. And he was like, typical African dad. He was like, I don't understand what you're doing, but it seems like you're doing something, so keep continuing, right? Yeah. And so actually, during Fanbytes, during the journey, it kind of gave me this extra level of grit. And that's probably something for a lot of people in the audience, which is like the things that you see early on in your life, which you could see as like negative, actually could end up being like the really core fuel that you need in order to get to the next level.
Yeah. And I like that. Did your academic ability on entrepreneurism ever mean you were mocked or bullied at school?
Well, depends what stage at school. Up until year 10, I did get a bit of bullying, but that was because I think it was more like teasing. People were almost like, what are you doing, basically? Like, why are you spending all your time in the library, blah, blah, blah. the thing is, those same people, actually, after you almost like prove yourself and you also show that you're not going to be stopped by some like measly words that people say, they respect that. It's kind of like when you're growing up, the kid who basically you can see is going to be a sick footballer, once they start getting trials, everyone respects them. But like when they're starting to go there and they're going away from the parties and going away from that, people are like, what are you doing? And then they start getting trials for like West Ham and Villa, and they're like, oh yeah, I always knew you were going to make it, right? Right? And I think that was the type of thing I got.
Brilliant. We're almost out of time, but one last thing, because it was a big question came up this morning about should I go to university? And you know, and a panel, we're not young people, but the panel was equivocal, some very interesting points. There's a question there about would you study A levels or T levels if you can do them, but the go to university, not go to university, you know, where would you land on that? Because you did.
Well, the answer I'm going to give, I am not responsible for any for anything that you decide to do. This is not financial advice, all right? So I would not have gone,
right?
But that's also because I had a vision of like running a company and doing the entrepreneurial path. And I think if that is your vision, you would learn more by doing companies, them not working out that well, and then learning from them and doing companies, blah, blah. That was my position. Now, I know people say like if you want to be a doctor, blah, blah. Yes, that is true.
Yeah.
But I personally would not have gone.
Yeah. Okay.
Again, this is not financial advice. You can do whatever you want, but.
And what I would always say is that it's a very, very individual thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
exactly. And if you want to, you do it. If you don't, you don't.
Yeah. Absolutely brilliant.
Cool.
Thank you very much. And thank you for listening.